nothing, again, specific from President Obama last night in his speech. But we did hear him advise Americans to not let this event cause a backlash against Muslims in this country.
Muslim Americans are our friends and our neighbors, our co-workers, our sports heroes. And yes, they are our men and women in uniform who are willing to die in defense of our country. We have to remember that.
Now, Republican presidential candidates are firing back, saying the president's response is just not enough. Listen to this.
People are scared not just because of these attacks, but because of a growing sense that we have a president that's completely overwhelmed by them. Nothing that happened in this speech tonight is going to assuage people's fears.
I think he was told that he had to do it because people are anxious, but he didn't lay out anything new, and he spent more time talking about what we shouldn't do than what we should.
Today's Pearl Harbor Day. Can you imagine FDR going before Congress and saying, we were attacked yesterday in Pearl Harbor? I really don't want to talk about who did it, but, you know, we just want to say there were terrible people and they were thugs.
And on Twitter, Donald Trump tweets, is that all there is? This is after the speech last night. We need a new president fast. Well, is the president handling the election to the Republicans by not being tough enough on ISIS right now and not being sympathetic enough to Americans who are worried right now? They are worried about the threat that some of these extremists may live amongst us. Joining me right now is radio host Leslie Marshall and former advisor to George W. Bush, Brad Blakeman. Welcome to both of you.
Thanks.
Brad, beginning with you, a lot of voters feel like right now there's a kind of void out there, basically, that needs to be filled. They need to hear from the president what he's doing. They need to hear some toughness when it comes to dealing with ISIS. They don't feel as though he's doing enough. Do you think that he helped to lay any of those concerns to rest tonight, last night when he spoke in any way?
Absolutely not. It was an embarrassment to him personally, to the office of the presidency, to our country. It was an overcompensation for lack of leadership. When a president addresses the nation from the Oval Office, he does so to rally a nation, not to lecture to a nation, not to apologize for our enemies who seek our destruction. You know, and in America, we have not taken action against the Muslim people, not at all. We have been tolerant of all religions, and we're not scapegoating the entire Muslim religion. What we are identifying is an enemy who identifies with a religion, radical Islam, and seeks our destruction. And until the president is able to identify the enemy, we can never deal or destroy the enemy like they should be.
Leslie, a lot of Americans feel like the president is blaming us and saying, you know, look, you know, you got to be extremely careful. You got to be politically correct in this environment. You can't call it Islamic extremism because that just sort of fuels the fire. Is this going to cost him? And, you know, again, we hate to break it down to the election, but we are living in such a world right now. Is this going to cost him, his party, and possibly Hillary Clinton?
Absolutely not. I mean, if you look at the polls today, the leader in the front runner in the GOP is Trump, and she has a major double-digit lead as of today. She's also viewed not just by Democrats, but Republicans, independents, and centrist, and has been and continues to be more hawkish with regard to ISIS and specifically foreign policy. No, that's not going to hurt him. But when we look at what the president said or didn't say, and I do want to respond, there's no backlash against Muslims. I mean, seriously, please Google a few of the incidents that have taken place around this country, things that Donald Trump is saying, things that some extreme groups are saying. What the president is talking about is key, because if you ask any counterterrorism expert, ISIS wants division. To divide is easier to conquer us here and abroad, easier to radicalize, easier to get the Syrians back home where they want those refugees. They don't want them in the EU or the United States. And I think it's essential that he says that, in addition to the fact, if we want...
Right. But Leslie, he can come out and say that let's be careful and let's not give ISIS what it wants and let's not be divisive. But by continuing to say that, he's got a lot of Americans really angry that he's not admitting the threat that they feel exists. I mean, shouldn't he finesse this message a little bit more so that he's making people at home feel a little more secure? And again, back to the politics of it, Hillary's going to have to be a whole lot more hawkish than him if she wants to win.
Well, I think she already is, and that's not a question. But with regard to assuaging the fears of the American people. I think a lot of people, look, myself included, especially we're just, as Americans, it's like, they've heard us, let's kill them, let's bomb them. But the experts on both left and right in the military have also said we have to look at not just how we do this, but who does it. It's essential that we have Muslim nations and Muslim soldiers taking out ISIS, and not just for symbolic reasons. That's an unstable nation,
right,
even after ISIS is gone.
But even in
we
doing
still
that,
have to deal with the civil war in Assad there.
Even in doing that, I mean, we're not getting that kind of rhetoric even from the president now, Brad.
No, we're not. And the fact is, the president has no resolve. He has no plan. When FDR addressed the nation after we were attacked in Japan, he didn't say that it'll take 10 years. He said we're going to defeat our enemy. And that's what we expect our president to say. And instead, we got excuses that Americans don't want to get into a protracted 10-year war. Look, it's the size of Ohio we're talking about to clean out ISIS. We can't defeat an enemy the size of Ohio with the overwhelming force of ourselves.
It does. It means a commitment of troops. We just heard from the general. You're talking 10 to 20,000. That's a far cry from the 250 we've got right now. Leslie and Brad, thank you, as always.
Thank you.
All right, everyone is.